Let's start with the top finishers for today's episode because, for the most part, positions 1 through 5 were typically the same. And then from about 6 to about 12th, 13th, 14th, we had a mixed bag. And we'll talk about that mixed bag and some of the surprise drivers that we continue to see perform well on these mile and a halves. But I want to start with Ryan Blaney because Ryan Blaney ultimately getting the win here at Atlanta. And Ryan Blaney has sort of written this narrative in his own career where we're so used to Ryan Blaney winning one race a year, whether that's a race that doesn't necessarily, or a race that Ryan Blaney didn't necessarily deserve to win. And then we also see Ryan Blaney have much problem with closing out races and this team closing out races. So Ryan Blaney now, this is another race. And I look back at the Charlotte Roval back a few years ago where he was in the right place at the right time after Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson in the final chicane got in a little scrap. And then I look at the past couple Talladega races, Ryan Blaney just squeaking out those wins by just a couple of inches. So Ryan Blaney driving for Team Penske, very, very talented young driver. This is the earliest in his career that he's won a race in race 6. Last year, race 13 in Talladega was the earliest, but now with this number here. So setting him up for success here to make some more progress and to possibly capture some more wins because his team definitely has to. But Blaney was fast all day, ran top 3 basically all day, and was in the right place at the right time. But the big story here, of course, is Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson dominated this race at Atlanta basically from the start, led over 250 laps at that point, swept both stages. But Kyle Larson failing to get the win, believe it's the 5th time in his career where he swept both stages of a race but failed to win the race. And I mean, this thing came down to the last 10 laps. Kyle Larson trying to get through some lap traffic. Ryan Blaney was hard charging right there in second place. But Kyle Larson, for most of this race, he was really the only car that can hook the bottom as good as anybody, getting those left side tires on the bottom and really making that car stick. But it just seemed to fall off there at the end. Something didn't seem right. Whether it was going through lap traffic, obviously a lot of people point to the whole incident, whether it wasn't even an incident, but the whole situation with Joey Logano being a lapped car, sort of helping his teammate Blaney out in a way, possibly breaking Kyle Larson's momentum, breaking his line, allowing Ryan Blaney to go back. But you can't put that fault on Logano because Kyle Larson's car just fell off. I mean, this guy at a point in this race had over a 10-second lead to second place. I mean, it was a blowout. So the fact that Ryan Blaney was able to overtake Kyle Larson was really, really impressive. And Kyle Larson, man, this one definitely has to sting for that team, but still extremely dominant on these mile and a halves. This team has to be encouraged with the speed that they have with Hendrick Motorsports across the board because Alex Bowman getting his season high finish of the season so far with a 3rd place. Very, very good run for that 48 team. Hopefully they can get some momentum going forward. And then Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, basically, Kyle Busch had to overcome from a pit road penalty, so he was able to salvage a top 5, so good to see them. And now let's talk about some of these mixed bag drivers here from around 6th to 12th. We have Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon, man, has really proven to be quite the wheelman at these mile and a halves with this package. So a top 10 for that team, really, really nice to see. And also got to talk about Chris Buescher and Roush Fenway Racing because it wasn't even just Chris Buescher. Ryan Newman had a very, very nice run as well. But we saw this speed from Chris Buescher at Homestead, Miami a few weeks ago where he won stage 1. The finish doesn't show it, but Chris Buescher had a lot of speed. And again, same narrative here at Atlanta. This team was running borderline top 10 all day, able to hang with some of these big boys. Ryan Newman was there as well, getting a solid top 15 finish. But Chris Buescher's been a story this year, been a big surprise. But with Jimmy Fenning overseeing the entire operations there over there at Roush Fenway Racing, it's no surprise to see Roush Fenway Racing make these improvements so quickly. So we'll see if it continues to carry over, but it's definitely something that we're going to have to watch because they are making some consistent moves over there at Roush Fenway Racing. Also want to talk about a guy, Matt DiBenedetto. He put together a pretty good run, was able to accumulate some valuable stage points, which is what this team needs, obviously, in this big hole, and especially with all of the surprise winners. And with 6 different winners in 6 different races, we're already a sixth way through the season with 30 races left. So the narrative continues with these different winners. So these points are so valuable for these guys, especially like Matt DiBenedetto, So great to see him run up front as well. And got to talk about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. again, hovering around the top 10 basically all day. Was able to come away with a 12th place finish. JTG Doherty Racing using Hendrick Power. No surprise to see JTG Doherty Racing up there battling for a top 10. It's the same narrative every single week at these mile and a halves, and it's no surprise to see these guys up there. And I want to shout out Daniel Suarez as well with Team Trackhouse. They put themselves in a great position and were running top 10 for most of the day, and wasn't able to really put together the finish for it. But Daniel Suarez, this team's got to be encouraged with the runs that they've had, especially here at Atlanta. And them too, they use RCR power. Austin Dillon had a great run at Atlanta here and has shown speed on these mile and a halves, both last year and early this year. So can Trackhouse sort of use some of that momentum to go forward? Because obviously the story is always going to be 23XI Racing and Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, but got to give some love to Team Trackhouse and what they've been able to put together here, because all the eyes were on 23XI Racing. So to see Team Trackhouse run top 10, challenge with the big boys, be able to run up there is really, really encouraging, and got to give the credit to them. Justin Marks, Daniel Suarez, Pitbull, all those guys putting together that ride. Really, really great to see, and hopefully they could ride some of that going into deeper parts of the season. We will see where that takes them. But it was Ryan Blaney, the Penske showman here at Atlanta, but some of these vets, man, did not show up. And I'm looking at the entire rest of the Penske lineup. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, just from the start, was not able to put together a complete race. Joey Logano caught himself a lap down, was running, 15th, 16th basically all day. Brad Keselowski fell off early on, didn't really have the speed, and then unfortunately got into a little bit of a scrap. The front nose got a little bit indented in that car and hurt their day, caught themselves a lap down. He was my pick to win. I've just whiffed on my picks the past 2 weeks. Kyle Busch last week, Brad Keselowski this week, So got to get back on the right track. But, Team Penske, they shouldn't be too worried. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, seasoned vets. They will definitely be winning races this year. But Ryan Blaney, encouraging to see that team in victory lane. Great to see Team Body Armor in victory lane. So congratulations to Ryan Blaney. Hopefully they can ride some of this momentum going forward. But we got to also talk about Stewart Haas Racing, man, because I want to talk about Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick, quote, drove the biggest pile of crap at Atlanta, but still finished higher than his SHR teammates. Kevin Harvick able to salvage a 10th place finish driving the biggest POS car that he has ever driven at Atlanta. Really, really is shocking. And it just goes to show, I think, where Stewart Haas Racing is right now, because Eric Almirola was nowhere to be found. Eric Almirola last year put together a string of 9 straight top 10 finishes last year. Majority of them on mile and a halves. And we haven't been able to see the speed out of this 10 car. He too is in a big points hole. He's currently tied with 26th with his teammate Chase Briscoe, who just has been non-existent and irrelevant as well as a rookie, despite how talented he is. And then Cole Custer as well, the sophomore driver. Got his win at Kentucky last year, but still trying to figure out just how good Cole Custer is in that 41 car. But Stewart Haas Racing over the past few years, not even that, just this year. Kevin Harvick last year, an amazing season with the 9-win season last year, and then falling off at the end. Stewart Haas Racing kind of not able to bounce back from their late season woes last year. Is it concerning? I think so, because Kevin Harvick, as I've mentioned, is on an island of his own at SHR. Eric Almirola is the number 2, and he's a guy that he doesn't win races. So I am concerned for Stewart Haas Racing. I'm not really sure where they're going to go from here, but it is concerning, especially with the talent and the speed that Hendrick Motorsports has brought, and especially with some of these mid-tier teams. You got Roush Fenway Racing putting together consistent top 10 runs at these mile and a halves. Austin Dillon putting together consistent top 10 runs on these mile and a half. So you got these mid-tier teams that are really making some noise, and SHR is nowhere to be found here in 2021. So I am concerned, and I think we should be going forward. But those are some of your top finishers from Atlanta Motor Speedway, and like I said, this race was not terribly eventful. For the most part, it was mostly run under green flag conditions. We did have a couple cautions that did play into a little bit of the strategy game, obviously with how abrasive this surface is and how much it eats tires. We were going to see the heavy tire fall off, and that could have, played into some strategy. But there really was none. It was a Kyle Larson dominant race. And, it was shocking to see him lose this race, man. It really, really was with how dominant this car was all freaking day. And then, last 10 laps, and Ryan Blaney's able to overtake him. But Atlanta's a really, really good track. It really is. People look at the surface and, there's going to be a time where we're going to have to repave this track. Hasn't been repaved since 1996. So it's going to lose its identity. The racing surface is Atlanta Motor Speedway's identity. So there have been talks of possibly renovating this track. Could they possibly do something like Auto Club Speedway is doing, converting that track into a short track? Possibly. But I do think that Atlanta Motor Speedway getting repaved does lose its identity. It's going to have to at some point because, that track surface is just going to get way too worn out. It's going to be impossible to drive. But for now, I still am a fan of Atlanta Motor Speedway. I really, really am. So hopefully, we're able to see a little bit more of a better race in the summer. And also with that, we talk about these 500-mile races and these endurance races, and there are two sides to that story as well. So, for me, as a diehard NASCAR fan, there's something to appreciate about these endurance races because a guy like Kevin Harvick who had a flat tire early, drove a crap car, still was able to salvage a 10th place finish. It was able to stay on the lead lap and was able to fight his way back up there. So it really shows the resilience of these teams and of these drivers to really be able to perform well. And, it is tough to watch a drawn-out 3.5 hour, 4 hour race sometimes. But from an appreciation standpoint and just from a team perspective, it really is cool seeing how these teams can work their cars and use that information to make their car better throughout this race and throughout these races. So should the Coca-Cola 600 be the only race that is above 500 miles, that's on 1.5 miles, being that it is a crown jewel, it definitely would add more emphasis to that and add, I think, more importance to that. The race at Atlanta over the summer is going to be a 400-miler, so that'll definitely be a little bit of a breath of fresh air for a lot of fans, especially after this race was a little bit of a snooze fest. So that debate is still going to be talked about, but for me, I value how these teams can work on these cars because that's all about the sport. That's a large part of this game, right? All about how teams can strategize to make their car better throughout the race. So that for me, I still like to see these 500-mile races despite the nature of them and how they could be, but I do value how these teams work, and it's something to be appreciated, and it's something that should not go unnoticed for sure. So we'll continue to talk about it, and I think we will get to a point where there won't be 500-mile races on 1.5 miles just because of our habits as people nowadays. And, it's hard enough to sit through a 2.5 hour sporting event, let alone a 3.5 hour, 4 hour NASCAR event, especially for new fans that, maybe don't understand, what goes into running the full race. So we'll see where it takes us. But for now, that's my opinion on that. So all in all, pretty good weekend. I will say this, it was so awesome to see all those fans in the stands, obviously abiding by COVID protocols in the state of Georgia. But one thing in particular, it was so awesome seeing the amount of families at the track and all of the youngsters that were there. Really, really awesome to see all the families out there bringing their kids, showing the love for the sport of NASCAR and getting them hooked early. We've seen NASCAR try and target this new generation, this new demographic, especially of young kids and the younger generation, especially on social media. We see that it is completely evident. So it really, really is great to see these families, these parents bring their young kids to these races and have a great time, man. It's really, really awesome. So great to see fans back in the stands. And hopefully, we'll be able to continue to see that down the road as we get into the summer months. And then hopefully come playoff time, who knows where we'll be by then. But obviously still everything under COVID protocols, abiding by the rules. Obviously, once we get through this pandemic, we'll be able to fully enjoy these races as intended. But nonetheless, awesome to see those fans in the stands, especially those young kids. And Ryan Blaney, just another thing that I love about Ryan Blaney, when he, giving the flag to the young fans is really, really awesome. And just another incredible reason why I love this sport. So all in all, pretty good weekend from Atlanta.